Mhm.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Louise from On Time Admin and BSW Connect, and I'm here today talking all things superannuation with Kevin Sallis from Sallis Financial Planning. He offers simple and effective, affordable financial strategies with great long-term results and has over 30 years experience in the financial services industry. So we just want to pop a disclaimer here saying that information provided in this video is general only in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. We do recommend that you seek individual advice and contact your own financial planner or Kevin directly if you would like some more information relevant to you. So Kevin, welcome. How are you going today? How are things in your world?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Thanks for inviting me on to your program there. Look, things are going fine. I think most people, generally speaking, with what's been happening on markets in general, I think would like to think that, or certainly our clients are informed enough to know that when things like this happen, not to panic, to hang in there. Markets eventually do recover. And those people that do have extra money, of course, it's not a bad opportunity to consider buying into the market. So we're going fine. We're not getting overwhelmed too much with too many inquiries.
Fantastic. So let's talk about this stimulus package. It's actually been a really hot topic this week with over, I think, 600,000 individuals contacting their super funds to draw out this $10,000 cash flow boost stimulus that's around there. So what are the rules around that and what does it actually entitle people to?
I think what happened when the crisis first came to the fore, I think it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction by the government to say to people they can take up to $10,000 from their superannuation fund. Subsequent to that announcement, they've obviously come out with the other payments that people can be entitled to, job seeker allowances, etc. So they kind of, I think, rather hurriedly put out this information to take money out of super without really thinking it through, or certainly thinking through the consequences of that action. But anyway, it's out there, it's available for people. And people can basically go onto the MyGov account, or open up a MyGov account for themselves, and via that channel, they apply for up to $10,000 from their super fund. The ATO then decides whether those people can qualify for that claim and take that money out of their superannuation fund. So my understanding is that it was $10,000 this financial year is available, and $10,000 next financial year also is available. So up to $20,000 they've been taken out of someone's super. So that's what's on the table, and I'd like to think that people who I guess I would like to think from a financial planning perspective that people don't take money out of super, because obviously we try and educate people as to why put money into super. But at the end of the day, I also appreciate that there are people out there possibly that are really hurting financially, and that money they can access super before their retirement age may come in handy.
So are there any rules around it? Do you have to have lost a certain amount of your business, or is it just for individuals or business owners? I'm just not really clear on if there's rules. I thought initially they talked about you needed to have like a 20% loss or something, but now it seems that it's open slather.
I think it's pretty much open slather. There's no rules that I'm aware of that says that you know certain criteria that you do or don't. It's simply a matter of putting an application through. And as I say, the ATO will be managing that. And what happens then is the ATO deal with the person's superannuation fund to organise the actual logistics of getting that money out. You're right, there's quite a few, I've sorted of figures today, quite a few people have lodged a claim to take money out. As I said, I think part of the education process in that is to, a lot of people think, oh, hoo-hoo super, I'll grab it whilst it's available to us. But I think we need to just have a bit of a measured approach to it. And one of the things that we just need to be mindful of is if once we take money out of super, it's very hard to get money into super in the first place. I mean, the government has a limit of $25,000 a year that allows people to put money into superannuation. So as you start getting a bit older, that's not a great deal of money. And as you get even closer to retirement, it really impedes us in a retirement planning sense, because it's not a great deal. So by taking money out, no matter what stage in life you're at in your working cycle, it's not necessarily a good idea. As I say, though, it may be suitable to some given their financial circumstances. And I think, Lou, one of the things we need to think about is what is the cost of taking that money out? And I don't mean fees. I mean, what is the cost of, from a compound interest point of view, if you left that money in a super fund? So I did some calculations through the Smart Money website, the government website. And if you left $10,000 in your superannuation at 5% return over 10 years, it'd be roughly about 16,470, about 16.5 grand. So an increase of about $6,500 if you left the money in for 10 years. Now, if you're a young person, and I'll say sort of in the 30s, looking at taking money out, then if we left that $10,000 in for 30 years, that would actually grow to $44,000 based on a 5% return. So an increase of $34,000. Looking at even further, if you did take $20,000 out, so 10 this financial year and 10 next financial year, the figures come out after 10 years is increased to 32, almost 33,000. This is $20,000. And over a 30-year period, you're looking at an increase to $90,000. So an increase of $70,000 on that 20 grand you're taking out, admittedly over a 30-year period, but that's really what superannuation is all about. It's a long-term savings environment for your retirement. So just be mindful. You might think it's a short-term fix now, but long-term, what are the consequences of taking that money out?
Yeah, so most people would probably be invested or have their superannuation sitting with an industry fund, or maybe a fund that an employer back sometime a long time ago set up for them. Now, most of those funds, my understanding, are either balanced or indexed. And what does that mean to people? Because people may not understand what that is.
Yeah, balanced fund basically means where is my money invested? So we put money into superannuation, but basically speaking, when you come to see a financial planner, that financial planner will take quite a lot of time of the meeting determining where someone's risk profile is, or what we call risk profile, but someone's comfort to where they're placing their money as far as a risk perspective. And I mean, how much is exposed to growth investments like shares and property, and how much is exposed to cash and fixed interest, which we call defensive investments. And of course, what happens is the more exposure you have to the growth investments, you have the better opportunity to grow. But of course, along with that comes the volatility. And so when things do go a little bit awry with the economy, or the latest episode with the crisis, the virus, that's where it reflects in performance over time should, by rights, be rewarded by being largely in growth areas, but you get a higher level of volatility because of exposure. So a balanced investor, generally speaking, will have 50% of their money in each sector. So growth 50%, defensive 50%. So it's really important that people have an understanding moving forward. Look at your statement and see whereabouts their money within their super is being invested. So therefore, you'll know and then make a reasonable choice for yourself as to where you're most comfortable, and therefore what volatility will I expect on what portion of my portfolio. Now, I think it's a very good question, Lou, and I think that's really it's a large question, a large area of our financial planning we deal with is that particular risk profile section that people do not understand. And I think they either need to talk to their fund, or if they want independent advice, obviously talk to their financial advisor.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you were just talking before about pulling the money out and the impact it can have. And we've seen this happen before, obviously with the downturn that has happened, that's happening right now in the stock market in certain areas. We've seen this before with the GFC back in 2007 or something. And for me personally, I've seen my super go up and down and all around and that sort of thing. As a small business owner, is now a good time to be putting money into your super? Should you be looking to continue to invest in your super, or should you potentially consider holding onto some cash?
It's a very good question, and one that's obviously, I guess, depends on people's circumstances, individual circumstances. In a broad sense, you'd have to say that if I use the example that, in January, someone's an investment property is worth 500,000, then with a crisis in the market, it drops down to, by 150,000 down to 350. Would you sell? Probably not. Would somebody then think that $500,000 house was worth 500,000 in January, now 350? Is it a good opportunity to buy? Interesting. So the same analogy with the share market. You go, okay, well, we've had this downturn, therefore underlying shares and property and unit prices are obviously lower than what they were in January. So, you could then make the assumption and go, okay, well, at the end of the day, they're cheaper now than what they were previously. So I think long term, sensible investing over the long term, it's better to be investing today than what it was January, of course. So yes, it's not a silly idea to be investing. Some people are still worried about the market and, could it fall further? Well, of course, no one has a crystal ball. We don't know the answer to that. It can fall further, quite possibly. But over a long term, it's not a bad time to be thinking about investing some money. If you can afford to put it in and invest, absolutely. But certainly talk to an advisor before you make your move.
Fantastic. So we're seeing examples out there where, and we'll just use a really rough example here, where for me, I never paid much attention to my super, and we were just talking about this before, but now I'm all of a sudden getting a lot of updates from my super fund, which I've never had before, and I'm assuming I'm not the only one out there getting this. But I had a significant dip of about $15,000 to $20,000 in my super from January to now, which, like I said, I would never have noticed that before because I didn't get regular updates. Is this something that I should be concerned about, or people should be concerned about, these dips, or is this just stuff that we've got to ride out because this virus is living in our lives right now?
It's a very good question, Lou, and it dovetails back to the risk profile question, which is really the foundation of financial planning as far as investing your money is concerned. Where are you most comfortable? What mix of investments are you most comfortable with? So getting back to that, when you do speak to a financial advisor or financial planner or your fund, that's where it's most important to understand that whatever exposure I've got to certain investments, growth investments, shares and property, for argument's sake, they will be subject to volatility over a period of time. There's going to be some time, like you mentioned, the GFC, it was over 10 years ago. It took a long time for markets to recover. So people have to understand that if you're going to go into those markets for growth, shares and property, etc., then you have to expect some volatility. Say your super funds dropped down by $20,000 or a certain percentage, that's not unusual when you have fear and anxiety come into the marketplace. People don't know what to do, so they try and sell to get out. And of course, they're possibly crystallising losses, etc. But at the end of the day, I don't believe there's nothing to be alarmed about. It's quite normal for that to happen on financial markets. Hold the course, and like we just mentioned, if you can afford to put a bit more money in, it may be an opportunity for you buying at a low. So things always recover over time. I've been doing this for a very long time now. In fact, I just last week ticked up 40 years in financial services. So I've seen markets come and go, and over the time, as they say, spring follows winter. Things come and go all the time, so the markets will recover. So it's no point in panicking about things. And so any dip in markets in certain situations like we've had is quite normal.
Fantastic. And just to finish up, what are your top 3 things that you think people should look at right now if they've got an industry fund, a super fund, a self-managed fund? What are your top 3 tips that people could look to do to make themselves feel comfortable at this moment in time?
Well, they certainly need to look at their risk profile, which is what we mentioned before. Where am I most comfortable with a mix? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Or which way do I want to be for growth orientated or more conservative, or somewhere in the middle being balanced? I'd certainly review that side of it. I'd review the actual underlying investments that are in the fund. And of course, it's always appropriate to look at the fees and what's costing me to maintain the superannuation fund, and just make sure those things are in place. And probably adding a 4th, I'd be looking at if they can, afford to contribute to super rather than taking out. I'd certainly be encouraging that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I think this is some really great conversations we're having, and we'll look to have another conversation soon about specifically self-managed super funds, because I think that could be very interesting at this time. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll get this out to everyone shortly.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks for inviting me on.